What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for tuning in. Today, we have a special guest. We have Barry Cohen, founder and owner of ProTek Watches. Barry, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing just well. Just fantastic. Thanks for having me today, Skylar.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's an absolute honor for you to come on. I really do appreciate it. So, first and foremost, let's do a wristwatch check. Let's give people their dopamine hit because that's what the enthusiasts like to see first. I'll let you go ahead.
Well, at the moment, I'm wearing one of our, hold on, it's hard to get it in screen. I'm wearing our titanium field watch today.
Gotcha. And I actually have the watch that you sent me, the PT 1004O for orange. I believe that O is at the end for the 1000 series.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Yes, sir. So, we're going to do things a little differently. We talked a little bit off camera. I actually want to run through your origins. I'm sure that you're tired of going over the same story. So, and you do a lot of heavy lifting in your interviews, but I wanted to do something a little different. And if you don't mind, I'd like to try to give it a shot. Of course, jump in, correct me on my facts if I got them wrong, but hopefully I don't. And we'll just take it from there.
That sounds great. I'll just sip tea while you chat.
Awesome. Hang on one second, Barry. I think I got to adjust my volume here. Hold on. Technical difficulties.
No worries.
Give me 1 second. I'm sorry, Barry.
No problem.
I should fix it. Okay. You can still hear me, right, Barry?
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear.
All right, perfect. Sorry, for some reason my headphones cut out. So yeah, from Timex to Tritium watches, that is where the journey began for you. At 10 years old, you received your first watch. Now, that's not really where the passion really exploded for you. From what I hear on the story, it was 2 years later when you got the Geneva watch. Is that correct?
Universal Genève, yeah.
Universal Genève, right. And that really is where your passion goes. Now, you told us a very interesting story with that watch. I don't know if you mind me telling that story.
Oh, I don't mind. It's a heck of a long time ago. No problem.
Gotcha. So you snuck into a country club. This is young Barry, by the way, guys. And I think this was high school. And you went skinny dipping with some friends. Cops ended up being called, and you guys had to hightail it out of there. And unfortunately, it cost you that watch.
Yeah, that's correct. Unfortunately.
All right. Now, question for you: do you still have the Timex? And did you ever repurchase the Universal Genève?
I no longer have the Timex. I never repurchased that watch, and watches kind of weren't at the forefront for a while. And a little later, after college, and I entered the business world, I bought a nice sort of a dress Seiko, and that became my daily watch, and I really enjoyed it. And I kind of ended up in the sales world, handling a lot of accessories, and it kind of whittled down to sunglasses and watches. And of course, this was at the time, the advent of the fashion watch in department stores. Swatch had come out, Guess, Fossil, and all of a sudden, watches was now a focus on the main floor of department stores, and I ended up moving into that direction with some Sterling, with some clean design, pre-Skagen, clean design, Skagen looking type watches. And that's kind of where it was. Eventually, watches became more of my world than sunglasses. And I realized that if I wanted to have a sustainable watch business, I needed one of two things. I either needed a very big brand, say a designer or something like that, so that it was sustainable. And even if somebody copied me, it was not the same watch. But I didn't have any access to those kind of people. So I searched for technology, and I found a self-powered illumination technology in Switzerland, and ended up in fax conversation with their CEO, and this went on for a couple of months, and finally went over to Switzerland to procure the rights to put it into a watch brand so that we'd have something that would be sustainable. I didn't do it myself. I had a co-partner or co-founder, Richard Timbo. The two of us did it together. And that's the advent of Luminox and how Luminox began.
Gotcha. Yes. So after you were able to successfully launch Luminox, you then pretty much, I think it was in 92 when you had them labeled as Luminox, when you had it shipped out?
Oh boy, memory, huh? I started without our brand name. And as we were going, I realized, if we really want to build something that's ours, we're going to have to put a brand name on it. So I went to the local public library and pulled out some Latin books to try and find a name that would make sense for what we were doing, and had about 30 names on a page. And the one that we settled on was Luminox because it fit what our brand was about, in that Lumi means light in Latin and Nox means night. So it was light at night. And in fact, our very first slogan was the nightlight of timepieces.
Gotcha. And I believe it was in 93 of a trade show, you had an officer, Navy SEALs, come up to you and basically wanted you to create a watch for them. They basically said, hey, if you create us a watch, you could market it. And that was really where you had your hook for a look, when you were successfully able to establish that relationship with them.
Yeah, well, luck plays a role, whether it's good or bad. And we had been doing outdoor retailer shows for a number of our products. And one day this fellow's named Chief Nick North happened upon us and said, I've been looking all over for you guys. If you guys make a watch for us for the SEALs, we're not going to buy that many. They ended up buying about 150. But you could tell the world the truth that we came to you, asked us to make it, and asked you to make it, rather, meaning us, and see if that resonates. And indeed it did, because there's only one Navy SEALs, and that's kind of how that got going. By the way, you want a little humor on that naming thing? Among the names that I was looking at, I did this really mostly as a joke, but the word Arden means to glow, Latin. And so Ardenox was a possibility. And I said to my partner, I said, we could choose that because that's the school we graduated from, the School of Ardenox.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. That's the first time I heard that one. That's the first time I heard that one from you as far as the stories go. So, all right. So at that point, Luminox watch company is pretty much takes off from there. For whatever reason, I think it was 16 years in, your partner decides to exit the business. He wants to travel the world. You pick up new partners. I'm just trying to move things along, if you don't mind. And you do pick up new partners. You're there with them for 10 years. 2016, you end up leaving the business with them. They buy you out, essentially. And no compete clause goes into effect at that point. And that's when we get Time Concepts. Is that correct?
No, Time Concepts began in 2007. Okay. And that's because I'd be at many trade shows, and people would come to the booth and say, hey, watches, would you make one for us? Whether it was a retail chain or a brand. And so I realized I needed a platform to develop and make watches for these opportunities. And so Time Concepts seemed like an apt name because we were developing concepts and watches. So, and that began with the Body Glove brand at the time, and several other, and then other brands. We developed watches and did design development for, 25, 30 groups. We did watches for Cabela's, for L.L. Bean, for Eddie Bauer, I did watches for Polaroid, for NBC, for BMW, for, oh gosh, I can't even remember. Quite a long list of companies. But at some point, I realized this is all well and good, but if we're trying to grow something, we should have a brand of our own.
Right.
And it was actually a celebrity chef, this fellow Tyler Florence, who lives in the area and had a couple of my Luminox watches, who suggested there was a void in the market for vintage-inspired design watches, and I realized he was right. So we added a brand called Santo and put that onto that platform, and so that was one brand that was now ours. Along the way, the Hawaiian Lifeguard Organization came to me and asked if we'd make watches with their brand, which we did and do. And that's actually a bang the crap out of it watch. It's a heck of a watch. It can really take a beating, and it's
Right.
very well priced, and I think well styled as well for what it is. Then I did a couple of other watch programs that were more cause brands, like for example, we saw the Me Too and the Time's Up movement, for women empowerment of women come along, and I've got a son, I've got a daughter, and I just thought, well, not a lot of things I could do, but I could create a watch that supports a cause. So we created a brand called Baya, with the express purpose to give back 20% of all proceeds to organizations that were supporting empowerment of women. We also did one for medical cannabis when I read that the largest chunks of our population at that time that were getting relief from cannabis were seniors and veterans. I thought, well, I mean, if we can't support them, who are we supporting? So I knew the guys that created the 420 moniker. In fact, one of them had printed our Luminox catalogs. He was in the printing business. And I just went to him and said, would you mind if I use 420? And we created a brand called 420 Waldos. That was their nickname, the Waldos. They were the 420 Waldos. And we brought that to the market as well. But with the advent of ProTek, which hit the market just about 2 years ago now, it was clear that I couldn't be spread that wide. And so we gave up Baya, we gave up 420. I just gave it to another guy. I know he's got them. We will ultimately exit Hawaiian Lifeguard as well. We'll keep Santo just because I got a sort of a warm spot in my heart about it. I like vintage design, but the focus is purely ProTek from here on out.
Gotcha. Yep. So the ProTech is really where the technology comes back into play, just so everybody knows. Prior to that, we were using just the regular conventional loom, but ProTech is really where you feel most comfortable, and that's exactly where you're putting back the Tritium tactical watches into play. Now, one story that's very important for people to know, I think, is that the military actually, the Marines rather, come to you after they did in the past and you weren't able to do something with them at that point, but they actually circled back once they found out that you were getting back into doing Tritium watches.
Well, at Luminox, my right-hand guy, a lifelong friend, Max Robertson, was a Marine, and once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine.
Right.
And a fellow from the Marine programs came to visit us, and certainly nothing but respect there for any branch of the armed services. But I thought it might dilute our Navy message that we had up and running. So we politely passed, and Max had been in conversation with this guy when Max knew I was going to develop this. And he did call one day and said, she said 2 sentences. The word's on the street, you're back in Tritium watches. I said, yes. And then extremely kind, very, very kind act, flattering even. He said, if you're doing it, we want it. And thus began a new relationship with United States Marines programs that we have within the brand. And we're not everything we have is tied to the USMC, but we have one series, and we're just launching a second series now, and there'll be a third series for holidays.
Gotcha. So yeah, carbon composite dive watches with Tritium technology, the 1000 series, first class quality for a better price, I think, than your competitors. There's some of the things that you put into the watch that really makes it separate from what's out there. your embossed logo in the case back is one thing to really, enjoy as far as it goes. And when I say embossed, it's really, really embossed. It's almost like a 3D effect, if you will. Your carbon composite cases have 30% carbon fiber, 70%
It is.
polycarbonate versus
It's
the 10%. Thank you.
It's
Versus
not
the 10%.
almost 3D. It is 3D.
Yeah,
Look at
absolutely.
the logos there.
Absolutely. And again, I was saying it's 30% carbon fiber that you're using. It's 70% polycarbonate versus the 10% carbon fiber that the competitors are using. So right then and there.
I always want to be honest on everything we say. Yes, we use 30%. There are competitors that are using 30%.
Okay.
There's also 10% that exists. And back in the old days when we first launched Luminox, ours were 10%.
Gotcha. Sapphire crystal in your watches, you've chosen to go that route.
Okay, so first of all, you talked about me getting back to tritium. I use the phrase "I'm back in my lane" because it's a lane that we helped to create. Now, to be clear, tritium lume existed long before we came along. It's been in a lot of military applications, lens-static compasses, and of course, night sights on weapons. And
right.
There were even a couple of brands of watches that were doing tritium watches, but they were aimed primarily at a military market. And we just thought, well, if this is an enabling technology, if we can bring it to the consumer market, why wouldn't they appreciate it too? And indeed, they did. And that's how that brand got going. Now, but when I came back to this, we started with sort of a through line that goes to the whole brand, which is rugged at heart, because we're not making ultra slim dress watches. We're making chunky sport watches. And so the whole brand is rugged at heart. And then we gave it the tagline all-terrain watches because it's not just dive watches. We've got land watches. Eventually we'll probably make something for air pilot style watches. We don't have that at present. So that's kind of the profile of the brand presently.
Right.
You're showing our newest, which is our the second U.S. Marines collection, which is the first time. By the way, let me jump back again. I'm going to jump around. I'm sorry, but when we came out with this, we on a clean sheet of paper, I created what would be our brand ethos, and that was no excuses and no compromises. And so our intent was to build quality from the outset, without question. And I think it was Vince Lombardi that said, perfection is unattainable, but if you pursue perfection, you have a good shot at arriving at excellence. And that's become sort of our mantra. We're trying to make perfection, and we are satisfied when we get to excellence. There's a phrase, good enough, and that phrase in and of itself implies that it wasn't as good as it could have been. It's like, okay, that'll do. Well, for us, it's got to be excellent.
Yeah.
And part of that was using some better components. Like every single watch has sapphire crystals with anti-reflective coatings. Our depth ratings, by the way, our carbon dive watches are fully rated to 300 meters, and our steel dive watches are 200 meters. Our land-based field watch is 100 meters, but all of these watches are tested to their full depth rating. And there's something for the dive watches, there's something we do that most don't do. And in water pressure testing, the standard is to test with air pressure, and then you batch test in water, because if a watch fails in water, you have to toss it out. But we insisted that every single watch is tested in water as well. So it's just trying to ensure that we're delivering what our brand promise is. Going further on the straps for the dive watches, we're using genuine rubber. We're not using polyurethane, which can tend to crack. It gets brittle and can crack. We had a lot of complaints about that in my old brand, and I just decided we're not going to do that. We're going to use genuine rubber across the board. And of course, the cases are all screw cases with screw case backs. In the case of the titanium watch, it's not a screw crown. All the others are, the dive watches are. The titanium has a push crown with multiple O-rings, but fully depth tested to 100 meters. And then if we use leather, we're using Italian leather that's treated to be waterproof. This strap right here, which is our field watch strap, that strap's been in water 50 times.
Okay.
So the difference between standard leather starts stiff.
Right.
You break it in, it gets soft, molds to your wrist eventually. If you get your hand, if you get it wet, it tends to get stiff and brittle and will crack usually right where the buckle is. This starts soft, gets softer, molds to your wrist, and if you get it wet, it will not crack and it will not get brittle.
Question for you. You say if you get it wet, is that like I could go diving with it, or is it just something that's more of like water resistance?
No. You get all our leather straps you can go diving with. Now this is a field watch, so it's not a dive watch, but our steel dive watches, you can go diving with it, no problem.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, that's actually really, really awesome. So I did have some questions for you. And I do want to try and turn it over and see if anybody's watching live, that if they had any questions. So guys, if you have any questions for Barry, please get them ready. I'm going to fire off some questions. Unless did you have anything else you wanted to add, Barry, to as far as the quality and everything else that you're putting into the watches?
Well, I could add this. It's one thing to hear it from me, but I'm very subjective. I'm, immersed in this every single day, really. Something that's been very encouraging for me, because we put a lot of heart, soul, effort, umpteen hours. There's a lot that goes into it. And we have been getting these unsolicited comments from consumers that have acquired one of our watches. And now this is just regular consumers, but it's very encouraging to read these comments, because what we're finding is they don't like our watches. They love our watches. And they're telling us, I got this one. And every time we launch a series, we throw it on Kickstarter. Now, we're not doing it to fund it, because we're funding it. And, that's a crowd fund vehicle. We're doing it to cast a wider net of awareness. I just looked at our most recent Kickstarter, and we got orders from 20 countries on the most recent one. Everyone has been at least 15 countries. So we would never catch that kind of awareness without using that vehicle. That's why we use the vehicle. So these people are sending in these comments saying, I got one, I love it so much, I went and got another one, then I bought this series. And that's telling us that we need to get one on somebody, and then hopefully they'll realize that they love what we've presented, what we've given to them, and become part of what we do ongoing as we launch new collections. But the comments that are really important about the quality are coming from people that really know the watch business. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you're familiar with the Blog to Watch, and they've reviewed us a few times and summed us up as, I'm paraphrasing, the best value in the world of Tritium watches. Well, I short margin the brand so I could get onto wrists, and so that's very kind. And then they've said it's of outstanding build quality, and those people know what they're talking about. They're certified watchmakers. A guy like Gary Gervinus, who was the publisher of International Wristwatch for 20 years and the lead editor, his comments were that we've upped the game in Tritium, and that you'd be hard pressed to find a better price value relationship. I'm paraphrasing once again. A guy like David Houston, who was the buyer at Harrington for years, says this is the best watch I've ever made, and he bought over 10,000 watches from me over the years. So now those guys know, it's different than a customer that says, oh, I like it, I like the colors, it fits well, and so on. These guys really know. And if you turn our bezels, there's zero play. Zero.
Oh my God. I was waiting for you to pause, because I was going to say I can contest actually having the watch that you sent me, and I'm really excited to do the review on it. But Barry, you're not exaggerating. There is zero play when it comes to it. And something that I know a lot of enthusiasts like, it still has a very loud clicking sound. I know it's a silly thing to say, but I mean, it still clicks. And guys, when I say zero play, I probably never had a bezel that had as little, or actually there's no back play. So he's not exaggerating when he sasays that.
And that the carbon that you have is a 60 click bezel, but our steel is a 120 click, and it's the same.
Okay.
So that's it. So that's stuff. I mean, these are the things that are important to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digressed. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and I think it is important for you to, doing things like this. I know that you are doing shows. I think maybe you backed off on it a little bit. I think that's one of my questions. That's one of my ending questions. I want people to know when's the next show that you're going to be at. How are they going to really get to touch and feel these watches? Because it's really a hands-on experience, and it's also doing things like this for people to know that I'm an enthusiast that does review contacts and everything else. They're really going to see what my reaction is of it. But as far as the shows go, is there anything coming up for you? Is there any place that they can touch and feel the watches?
Well, as you know, we just went through this thing called a pandemic, and that certainly
Yes.
it changed the way business is done in general. The whole notion of commuting to an office or working remotely, and also trade shows certainly went down. There's no question. And where I used to do up to, if not me being there, somebody from our company was there, up to, I don't know, 15, 17 shows a year. We're really down to just a couple shows. The next show we'll be doing is the SHOT Show. I do the SHOT Show every single year in Las Vegas. That's the shooting, hunting, and outdoor trade, because it caters to the outdoor enthusiast, to law enforcement, to military, and there's more beyond that. So we do that. Interestingly, which is odd, surprising actually. I walked into the brand Bonobos, which is a hot brand for younger people. I just walked into a store the other day, and I was looking at just some of the garments and got to chatting with the manager. What do you do? I told him what I do. I showed him my watch. I happened to have a brochure. I said, here, take one. And he said, this is great. Would you consider doing a trunk show for us? I said, well, I've never done one, but sure. So I'm doing a trunk show. That's a show, but it's
Right.
at a specific store in the mall. That's coming up in August.
Mhm.
And then we'll give special discounts to people that find us at that store. And by the way, we're offering a special discount to your viewers,
Yes.
which we
Yes.
talked about. People can see our brand and look through everything we do at protekwatch.com, and that's PROTEK watch.com. And if they enter the code SKY, short for your name, they will get a 20% discount on anything we make.
Yes.
So that's a little something for your audience.
Yeah, no, I really, really appreciate that. That's going to be also in the description for the people watching. I get a lot of my viewers, they watch on the playback. Fridays are really tough for them to get on the live, but there's definitely going to be viewers to look at this. Once we're done, they'll look at the playback, and I'll leave all of the information that you talked about in the description for them to take a look at. I got a question for you. So let's address the elephant in the room. For the person that's not educated on the technology, they hear tritium, they're thinking nuclear, they're thinking maybe radium. I know the answer to this question, but I rather them hear it from the professional. And let's debunk the scary thing about putting something like this on your wrist, especially as a daily. Like if somebody's really excited about the Lume technology and they want to put this on daily, perhaps sleep with it, whatever the case may be. What does that look like?
Well, so that was a serious concern of mine when I entered into this whole thing. I knew it was nuclear, and I thought, oh my gosh, is this going to be something to be concerned about? And in my meetings with the CEO of the company which is the world leader in luminous compounds, and in tritium gas, I asked very clearly, how dangerous is this? I was in my 30s, and I said, I got kids, I want to be around. And here's some comparatives for you. So if you took all the tritium tubes, and I can describe that too if you'd like, or for your audience, but if you took all the tritium tubes that are in the watch, which are on the hands, at the hour markers, and if there's a turning bezel, in the turning bezel, so you can always find, so you can use that for timing, dive timing. If you're not a scuba diver, timing your parking meter even. But if you ate all those tubes, up to 16 tubes or whatever, could that be dangerous for you? And the answer is absolutely not. If you eat a banana, you will take more radiation into your body than if you ate all those tritium tubes. If you fly cross country at 35,000 feet, more radiation will go into your body from that than if you eat all these tubes. So it's harmless.
Right.
And then if you care to hear, and I don't know if your audience cares to hear how the actual technology, I'm happy to explain it. But
yeah, absolutely.
Let me give you a little bit on luminous time. So, before World War One, men didn't really wear pocket watches. Uh, I mean, they didn't. Excuse me. They didn't wear wristwatches.
Wristwatch. Yeah.
They wore pocket watches. But when wars often beget new either technologies or trends or whatever, and so here you had these guys in the trenches and they're carrying weapons and all kinds of gear, and they don't have another hand to go grab a pocket watch. So that's when it got strapped to the wrist.
Right.
Now, in those days, the factories were painting those dials photoluminescence. It means it accepts light energy, whether it's sun, foggy day, rainy day, halogen. I don't think halogen existed then. Incandescent. It's energy from light. It accepts that energy, which excites the paint. The paint was a liquid dried to a solid. Excites that paint. It gives back a glow, but fades to dark. It needs to be recharged with another dose of external light. And the people that were in the factories using radium, it's a noxious substance, they died young. There was a change after World War One where they moved to tritium paint, still a liquid that's painted, becomes a solid, still a photoluminescence. And that was pretty much the staple of time, luminous time, until superluminova came along. And that's the staple today. So
Right.
in our other brands, we use superluminova. And the thicker you paint it on, you multi-print, you get a thicker a thicker layer is the word,
Right.
superluminova, and so therefore there's more material to accept light energy.
Correct.
It can store more and then give back a glow longer. The thicker it's on, the longer it'll glow. And my Hawaiian Lifeguard watches, they'll glow 5 hours. You can read it time in the dark, no problem. But because we do multi-print, print. But it's very different from what we use here. So.
Right.
This is a factory that's separate from an assembly facility. So this is just about the loom. And the essence of that is that borosilicate glass, which is Pyrex, a cooking dish, is heated and in tubes and stretched down to diameters of 1/3 to 2/3 of a millimeter, depending on the tube size. After it's cooled under big magnification goggles, kind of looks like that Oculus thing. It's filled with a glue, so the whole vessel is fully coated. That's why they use the magnification. And then a phosphor powder is poured into there. Again, magnification, make sure it's fully coated. And different phosphors will yield a different glow color in darkness. Now, one end of that tube is sealed with a CO2 laser for a nice rounded end on the tube. Then it goes over to vacuum machinery. Why a vacuum? I'll tell you. These tubes are attached to nipples or attachments where tritium gas is pumped into the vessel.
Right.
And it's done in a vacuum because you can get more gas in a vacuum. And then it's sealed again with a CO2 laser. The moment that's sealed, the tritium is emitting beta, and the beta is causing the phosphor to fluoresce on its own. That's why it's self-powered loom. And it will continue to fluoresce for about 25 years. Those 18-inch tubes, I can't show it in your screen there, but those 18-inch tubes then go over to the CO2 laser where they're computer programmed to be cut to the sizes of the minute hand, the hour hand, the second hand, the indices. You can get 10,000 tubes into a box of about 4 inches by 4 inches by 1 inch. And then that's sent to the assembly facility where they are attached to the hands and attached to the dials and the indices and or the bezels. So there's an additional manufacturing step that is not in standard or conventional watch manufacturing. But then once all that's done with the loom, then it's standard watch manufacturing. And all of our watches are assembled in a dust-free clean room.
Gotcha. So question, if somebody wants to see the watch, are you guys only online or are there actual brick and mortar that people can visit to see the watches?
No, we're in about, not that many, like 36 stores in the country.
Okay.
We're a young entity, and to be honest, since the pandemic, the world's changed a little bit once again. So it's more difficult to gain entree into stores. That's another story that goes back to conglomeration of retail, where retailers today want to have proven entities before they give it a chance. So, and we've also seen the direct-to-consumer business grow significantly. So I think half of our business today is direct-to-consumer. And then the rest is through a variety of accounts, whether it's online jewelers, online sporting, or at brick and mortar. And then those brick and mortars also have online.
Gotcha. So for the 2000 series and for the 3000 series bracelets, steel bracelets and titanium bracelets, anything on the works for that? And are they going to have quick release functions on them? Are they going to have on the fly adjustments? I know that's really big as far as what people like to get out of their bracelets.
Well, we're doing our steel bracelets. Okay, so I just told you that we have these, the new, which you showed before, the new.
Yes.
Sorry about the glare. The new automatic mechanical. I didn't touch on the movements. I should tell you that the automatic mechanical United States Marines watches that just came out maybe a month ago, and we are launching next month our steel dive watches, which also have automatic mechanical. And in this case, we're using Seiko's 24 jewel movement, which is, it's a workhorse. It's a very robust, dependable movement. It's in.
We're talking about an NH35.
Yes.
Okay.
And in many of Seiko's wonderful dive watches, they make fantastic dive watches. We figured that was a good way to go. In our quartz, by the way, we're using Miyota movements from Citizen. Now, a little interest, if you mind, I'll tell a little story. So I had dinner with a Swiss watchmaker from the Swatch Group before launching the brand, and spoke of everything we were going to do. And I saved one thing for the end. I said, and by the way, we're planning to use Citizen's Miyota quartz movements. And as a proud Swiss person and a Swiss watchmaker, who was working for Omega at the time, I said, I want to know what you think of that. And the answer I got was fairly surprising when I was told, darn smart decision. Everybody knows it's the most robust quartz movement in the industry. Now, I don't know that everybody knows. This person is a watch expert and said that. But we haven't had a movement failure yet. So, I believe it. So it seems like it was a good choice. I certainly have nothing against Swiss movements and no problem. But if we were, it just for this brand, the phrase I used is that I wanted to build this brand the way I believe they'll be best. And so I've chosen Japanese movements, but nothing against Swiss movements.
No, of course not. And in my experience with Japanese movement, I use a lot of, not I use, but I have a lot of NH35 movements in my watches, and they take a knocking, they take a beating. I have quartz, I have the same Japanese Miyota movements that you have as well. I don't get it why some people get rubbed the wrong way about them. They absolutely are phenomenal. They last a very long time. They're incredibly accurate. And, I look at it like this, Barry. When you need a service call, you could pretty much just swap out the movement. You could just buy a new movement, put a brand new one, instead of spending so much money on servicing that movement, which is going to cost you so much more, So, that's the way I look at it, at least, Okay, so
with what we have.
What's that?
We're very satisfied with what we have.
Absolutely. So the turnover rate for your stock, well, you did mention that we have 25 years for the Tritium. What does it look like for me to purchase the watch and say, like, if someone is worried about it being on the shelf for maybe 5 years, and do they lose that time with it? Like, how does it work for your turnaround time versus the longevity of that Tritium tube?
Well, there is no question that the lume will decline over the 25 years. That's just part of it, part of using tritium gas. But, we're not making $5,000 watches where all of a sudden you go, this thing, I can't see it anymore. I got to throw it out or whatever. And by the way, you don't have to anymore. There are people, and we have a guy who we work with in the US who retrofit watches with new tritium tubes. So that can be done. But, our watches are $495 to $525 for almost everything we have. They really should be priced about 100 higher, but I told you I came in short margined. Then if we have PVD plating on those, they go up $25 to $550. And the automatics that we have are $695, and again, those should be $795. So you're not talking about really big amounts that you would lose when the loom declines.
Fair enough.
And as I said before, today you can get that loom replaced.
Yeah, no, that's great, because that was, you know, it's funny. I was going to ask you that question, but I kind of felt like it was a stupid question, because it was like, oh, come on, you got 25 years out of a watch that was very, very fairly priced. And again, it's important for people to understand that full process that you're doing. Not only are you making sure that the watch is going to hold up on rough conditions, whether it be a first responder or whatever the case may be, but you're actually you're taking two places and you're putting it into one watch, right? You have to get the tritium tubes cared for. You have to make the two meet. And then you also are working with factories in Hong Kong, I believe, that are phenomenal with their numbers as far as the quality goes, quality control, QC is concerned.
Yeah. Okay. So I've been in about 30 some odd factories in the watch career. I've had about 7 in Switzerland, the rest in Asia. I've seen Omega being built. I've been to the Swatch factory. I've been to, I haven't been to Rolex or ProTek. They're not letting me in the door, but I've seen Hamilton being made, Mido, a long list of Swiss brands, of course, Luminox. And then in Asia, I've been in factories that I have to admit, I didn't really want to step into. Some of the case stamping factories and so forth. There's grease all over the place. But quite by accident, I happened upon one factory for my non-tritium, where this guy is obsessed with quality. The entire factory is a dust-free clean room. You could lick the floor. The only thing you see, they're covered head to toe. All you see is their eyes. That's it. And so that's in my other watches. But what I'm very pleased about in the facility that makes our tritium watches is it's patterned after the best Swiss manufacturing facilities, and it too is a clean room, and it too is spotless. So, I'm very comfortable with our suppliers. I'm lucky, frankly, to have those kind of suppliers, and they care. They're not just producing it and here you go. They believe very much that it speaks to who they are.
Right. Take pride in your work. It's kind of like an honor for them. It's something that they really cherish as far as that goes. And I believe we're jumping around a little bit here, but I believe that it's 10 years on the battery that you have inside those movements that they're going to last. And that's important because obviously you're compromising the seals.
Well, our dive watches are using a 10-year battery movement.
Right.
And my reasoning there is that the less you have to open a water watch, the better off you are. Look, I always say send it back to our service facility because they will pressure test the watch, and when it comes back, it's pressure tight. But a lot of people just walk into a department store or a local jeweler and say, "Could you change my battery?" And of course, they do that. But they might crimp a gasket. You don't know, and you don't know that it's pressure tight, and you could end up with an issue. I'm not saying you will. I'm sure 95% of the time or more you won't. But I just think if you don't have to open it, that's even better.
Yeah, exactly. And just limiting that. And I think it's 4 years, I believe, for the field watch.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just wanted to
now our automatics, you never have to open them.
Exactly. So Protech brand currently
bracelets, and I didn't answer you. So let me
yeah. Go ahead.
I jumped off onto something else, but the steel dive watches will have steel bracelets available, I think, next month. And when we do a bracelet, I should tell you about our designer for a second there. I've worked with this guy for 30 years. We have a very nice, long-standing working relationship and friendship. And he was with a major Swiss house designing watches for the likes of Gucci and Tag Heuer for years. The Formula One was his, for example. Tag Heuer's Formula One, some of the top Gucci's. Tag Heuer's 2000 series of 20 some years ago, that was a great looking watch. And so our steel watch, we actually patterned after that watch, but made it more contemporary, a little more robust, a little sturdier looking. So on our bracelets, we don't just like slap a bracelet onto the spring pin. Of course, we do a fully integrated end piece, and then the bracelet design itself picks up the design of the watch head. So it's literally
Oh, wow.
made for the watch. We never take something off a shelf, ever.
Okay.
And you'll find the same in our titanium field watch, which, by the way, is only 48 grams. You don't even know it's on your wrist. It's
Wow.
feathered. I just showed a cop the other day the watch. I said, "Here, I hope this isn't too heavy for you." He goes, "Holy crap! What the?" I mean, it's so light, it's crazy. But there again, that bracelet is a fully integrated design bracelet that fits the watch head. It's made not just fits physically, fits aesthetically.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And you're going to have a diver extension or quick
We
release
don't
on
have
that?
a diver extension on it.
Okay.
No, we do have a folding diver extension, but we don't have like the Rolex one that you can adjust every millimeter type.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, that's fine. I think that'll work enough. ProTech, where is the brand currently in your feelings as far as it goes? And what's the agenda for the next 2 to 3 months? I don't like to ask a year, 2 years. Who the heck knows, right? But 2 to 3 months, let's say. What's the plan?
All right, so we got both automatic series. One just arrived. One's coming next month. We got bracelets in steel coming next month. We got bracelets in titanium coming in two or so months. We will have a new titanium field watch to come out at holidays, which is a United States Marines field watch. And I'm working on another carbon diver that has a different aesthetic. It's a little more, it's a little larger, and it's also very aggressive looking, very, the look of G-Shocks and how they have
Yeah.
that certain feel and that certain look, which is great. G-Shock's a wonderful brand.
Oh, yeah.
It's going more in that direction of something that's kind of obviously aggressive.
Okay. Okay. That's good to hear because a lot of my viewers actually like the oversized watches, believe it or not. I think personally, and they get mad at me for saying this, but I think watches are going traditionally back down to being smaller, but you're still going to have your crowd of people that absolutely love the oversized, heavy feel. And a lot of my viewers do like that. So I'm actually excited to hear that.
Well, there's no question about that. But okay, so I was in Basel 12 years ago, maybe, and I saw Oris came out with a 36 millimeter men's watch.
Mm-hmm.
Guessing on the time frame, and I was startled, as I think the whole industry probably was, because I mean at that time my women's watches were 38,
Right.
and I thought, oh, maybe this is a harbinger of normalcy. We're finally going to get back to where. I mean, let's face it, watches got up to 50, 55 millimeters, like wearing a clock on your wrist. I think that's ridiculous, but we had to go with the trend, and so we made watches as large as 48. Most of what we made in that time period were 44 for sure, a little bit of 45. But I was very enthused to see watches come down to what I call a more wearable size. So I decided that we're going to take our carbon and our dive pieces down to 42 where it's a midpoint of not getting too. You didn't want to go below 40 for sure. I mean, Rolex is 41. It's good enough for them. So we brought it down to some semblance of normalcy. And I went off to the SHOT Show with that customer profile I told you about. And I was just waiting for somebody to say, oh, that's too small. Now, one person said it at 3 successive SHOT Shows. And in fact, some of those guys said, oh, this is a much more wearable size. So, and then from a styling standpoint, we also didn't want that collection to be that aggressive look, because we were going for what I would call a timeless design, a classic design that will always be fine for decades. And then our field watch, which I'm wearing here, that's 40. Now, we see a lot of field watches now, 37, 38, 39. But because of the brand's values, I thought I shouldn't go below the 40, so we just went to 40. And I asked those same guys, is that too small? No, that's good for there. Okay, so I think we're okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you mentioned somewhere down the line, maybe I made this up, but are you working on a pilot's watch?
We have a couple of renderings we've kicked around. I can only launch so much at one time.
Right.
We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things we're already going to get out this year. If we do something like that, it would certainly not be this year. And development and production takes time. I mean, the development itself, the design back and forth, that takes a couple months, and then the actual production and tooling and so forth. So it's usually a 6-month program. So certainly nothing in the very near future.
Gotcha. So I think that's pretty much all the questions that I had. I just wanted to scroll through the comments, and I believe some people are telling me that Mark Time, he's actually another brand owner. He had a good question. Let me pull that up here.
What brand does Mark Time own?
It's called Mark Time. Conveniently enough, he's an independent brand. He's hand making his own watches. He sent me one of them as well for me to look at. But he said you talked about I'll say that again.
Hello, Mark.
Oh, there you go. He said you talked about striving for excellence and being happy with excellency, but always pursuing perfection. What are you trying to perfect right now, and what have you recently been happy with excelling at?
Well, it's sort of I told you it's our mantra. So it all comes from the fact that there's nothing more disappointing than returns because they're defective. So that's where it comes from. So we want a watch to go one way, out the door, onto the wrist, and stay there. We don't want people having problems and sending it back. So that's what I mean by striving for perfection and trying to arrive at an excellent end product.
Right. And you did mention, we talked about it, but that factory that you found, the manufacturer, if you will, being so clean, and they were actually oftentimes under, what did you say, like 0.5% on QC?
Well, okay, so the other factory, the non-tritium one, where we have a little longer history, since 2013-ish, we always are below 1% defect, and we found that sometimes we're even down around 0.5. So I'm pretty pleased with that.
Gotcha. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. I really appreciate you coming on here. I love to be part of spreading the good word, spreading the gossip, if you will. I'm sorry. I tried to do my best as far as telling your story. You kind of saved me there, jumping in. But this was a lot of fun, Barry, and I hope that we can do this again, maybe on some new releases that you have. I absolutely would love to have you back on just to talk about them. We talk about exposure being a very important thing, and I'd love to have you on again.
Well, it'd be a pleasure. If there's any more questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, no problem, but it's a pleasure to be with you. I thank you for taking the time. I will, if you don't mind, I'll mention a watch with a great story that you should be considering for possible review. There's a guy named Frank Stephenson who's a friend of mine, and he's a globally known designer. And we created a watch with him called the Frank Stephenson Collection.
Right.
His design is sleek and smooth. He was the director of design at Ferrari and the director of design at McLaren, designed the Mini, designed the Fiat 500, several Maseratis. He's one of the great designers in the world. And he created a very unique piece that can be seen at santotime.com. But that's something you should review at some point because it's unlike anything you've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a phenomenal watch that he designed. He did a bunch of, I think he did Maserati, BMW. There was a couple of cars that he designed for.
Well, he created the design language for all BMW sport utilities by creating the BMW X5. He created the design language for McLaren because they had none. They weren't a road car company. They brought him in as director of design. He's just, he gives TED Talks. When you hear him talk about biomimicry, it's incredible, which is basically taking nature and copying nature. For example, the way the water flows over a fish's gills, or the way the air flows over a bird's wings, and then employing that into the aerodynamics of a vehicle. It's just fascinating. And I know I'm off ProTek, but it's an exciting thing. And he designed a baby car seat that won Best Design at Consumer Electronics. He's designing short takeoff and landing taxis of the future. He's designing a spacecraft to take tourists to space like Branson.
Mhm.
It's just getting, he is so busy, it's not funny. Everybody wants him. And
And
he,
as
and he just came up with this one day. He said to me, why don't we do a watch? Okay, let's do a watch.
and that's part of the Santos signature. That's like where you did
It's,
those collaborations with iconic people.
yeah. So what we have in the Santo brand, this is vintage inspired designs made for today. But in that brand, I realized that, we live in a world where people focus on famous individuals. And I figured, hey, I know some of these famous guys. Why don't I talk to them and see if they want to do a watch together? And then we do it together. I don't do it. We do it together. So the first one we did was for Indy Series champion and Indy 500 winner Danny Sullivan. We just did a limited run, 500 pieces sold out. Then we did one for world known big wave surfer Shane Dorian, again from Hawaii, a limited run, sold out. By the way, he's the coach of the U.S. surfing team in the Olympics right now, and globally known as a surfing icon. These are all icons, hence the term Santo icon. We did one with Roland Sands from the motorcycle industry. We still have some of that. That's a cool as heck watch. And he's worked with every major motorcycle manufacturer that you can name and was a 250cc champion. There's a few others we're probably still going to do some things with, but Frank is the more recent one, and that's why I brought it up.
Gotcha. Let me ask you a question, Barry, because all of this stuff is leading to other things. I know of a gentleman that is looking to start his own independent brand. If he wanted to reach out to you and possibly use your connections to those, good factories that you have, the good manufacturing, what would that look like? Is that something that you would take on? Is there a minimum for that? Like, what does that look like for somebody coming to you with it?
No, absolutely. We do that all the time. So it's happy to help. I don't know if you're saying just tell you go there, or if the guy actually needs somebody to make it for him, but we do that all the time. And so let me give you the parameters there. I mean, over the years in my old brand, I made watches for DEA, Secret Service, FBI, ATF, various police forces and SWAT teams. And there we sort of personalize it for those groups. So of course I went back to some of these groups, and we've done design development for, I have two in development for ATF, retired and active. We got one for San Francisco Police in development. We got San Diego SWAT, working on one for LAPD, just delivered to the Oakland Police Department. They love it. But those are taking our Protech designs and personalizing for them on the dial and the case back. If somebody wants their own product, again, we could take one of ours and personalize it and make it theirs of any of our watches. But if somebody wants their own product, you're driven, the driver there is the case. So if you're working out of Switzerland, the case is going to be 1,000 pieces that you can then turn into up to, say, 10 watches, because the dial is 100 pieces. Straps are 100 pieces. Bracelets are usually 200 or 300. And if you do this out of Asia, which frankly I don't see why you wouldn't, then your minimum is now dropped to 500 cases. So you take all those other stats I just gave you there for dials and bracelets and so on. And then if somebody wants to have a watch made in one of our cases, one of our designs that already exist, but we just customize the dial and the case back, then it's only 100 pieces. So that allows somebody to jump into something at a much lower minimum order quantity.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And if anybody wants to do that, or any of your audience wants to do that, I mean, we do it. It's what we do. So happy to do it for anybody.
Got it. Well, I appreciate it. That definitely we covered a lot of ground, I think. I'm very excited about the ProTech watch that I have on here. I'm actually going to be, for those who are watching on the playback, I'm going to be releasing a deep dive video as far as covering the watch and presenting it to you guys, aside from doing this. And this video would also be a link for it after the fact in case anybody did miss this interview that we did, Barry. And like I said, I'm excited to. Well, I'll tell you right now, I've got my eyes on the 1200. I think it's the 1212, the automatic series with the red dial that we showed earlier.
You know, it's funny you mentioned it because obviously I can wear anything in the line. I'm going to take this 1212,
Right.
and yeah, that's it. And I'm going to with the red dial,
Mhm.
and I'm going to pull a Mr. Wonderful. You ever watch Shark Tank?
Yeah, I know where you're going with this. You're gonna put a red band on it.
Exactly. So this is going to be red throughout with the carbon case. And you know, when you use a carbon case, it's not black, it's charcoal. So
Okay.
I mean, here's just another example. What's the easiest thing to do? You got a charcoal case. You put a black strap on it. We put a charcoal strap on it. We pay extra for it, so it fits the case perfectly in terms of the look. But anyway, that red one has got. I'm thinking I'm going to go Mr. Wonderful on it. Hey, Kevin, if you're out there, we'd love to have you wear one.
All you have to say is red band. You have a very good chance of him catching his attention as far as that goes with that. So, yeah, that one caught my eye. I don't have a red dial yet in my collection. And when we first made contact, you said, hey, Skyler, when you get this on wrist, you're going to be a believer and you're going to want to own one. And you were absolutely right. And when I saw that you had an automatic version, because, you know, listen, quartz is definitely in my collection. It's definitely useful, especially for these guys that are going out and saving lives. You know, they don't have time to wind the stem or worry about the power dying off. But automatic for me, as being a just an office guy, right? Not really having to save lives. I like that smooth sweep and everything else. And that red dial is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm definitely going to put that in the collection as well.
Well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for having me. I hope, you know, it went on for a while, so I hope your audience doesn't get bored.
No, it's okay. When I do my lives, it's usually this long. But yes, thank you so much for coming on. I definitely want to do this again with you, possibly on a new release. Ton of fun, Barry. Thank you so much, and have a great West Erie weekend.
Thank you. You too. Appreciate your time. And thank you, audience, as well.